Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Sarah. This is my Granny Era. Tonight I want to share with you guys my weekly wrap up. I have had a very productive reading week. I have read so many books. I don't really know, did I do anything else this week besides read? Not a whole lot. So the first thing that I read this week, I finished Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. And I can't say that my mind has changed too much about it. I mean, obviously it's an unbelievable story, but I also think that her execution is just not believable within that story. So that's what I've kind of always ranted about, but I did say that I would give it a try this month and see if I could change my mind about Frankenstein. The one thing I will say is I have always sort of had an issue with it being very wordy and, you know, just kind of like flowery and tangenty and all that. It is nothing compared to Mary Shelley's The Last Man. So I read this right on the heels of finishing The Last Man, and I'm really glad that I did that because I was able to compare those two and realize, one, that's Mary Shelley's style, and that's fine. But two, I have nothing to complain about with Frankenstein if I'm not going to make the same arguments about The Last Man, because it is very wordy, extremely wordy. It could be as short as Frankenstein probably, this is just 166 pages where The Last Man is like 500. So it could be the short if she cut out a bunch of stuff. The thing I think that gets me about Frankenstein that I just have a hard time reconciling is the idea that the monster may be in any way held guiltless for his crimes, that those crimes may in any way be the fault of his creator, Victor Frankenstein, rather than of his own doing. I get the impression that that is kind of the message that is supposed to be being sent here, is that the monster is not all that guilty. He didn't know, and he had good reason for committing the crimes he did, and the Victor was very much at fault for creating him in the first place and not fathering him in the way that he should have and bringing him up to be a decent, you know, giant of society and all these things. But the whole argument falls apart when you listen to this this creation talk, when you listen to the way he speaks. For one thing, his knowledge is very inconsistent. Like, he is aware of the mythical story of Pandemonium, yet he doesn't know fire will burn him. He spends a few months spying on his neighbors, and then suddenly he can quote Plutarch and Milton. He just kind of goes on in these endless philosophical orations. In some ways, he appears more intelligent than his creator, so I have a hard time thinking that he is not aware enough of the societal norms and the no-nos of murdering people left and right. The guy obviously has a conscience, and he obviously has a high level of understanding of the society that he lives in. So I put the blame completely on the creation, the monster, the big guy, whatever. I put the blame completely on him for all of his actions, and I do not hold Frankenstein at fault. I think he had a really bad idea. I think that he rectified it when he refused to make a bride for this monster, and he said, no more, I will not do this no matter what it costs me. And no, I don't actually hold Frankenstein in contempt like I used to, but I don't anymore. So that's my reading of Frankenstein. Probably won't read that again for a while, but I am glad that I went through it. Alright, the second book I read was called The Glass Hotel by Emily St. John Mandel. I just blew through this book and the next one that I read, also by her. So this past summer, I stumbled on her book Station 11 at a book sale, and I knew nothing about her. I'd never heard of any of her books before, but I read the back of it and it sounded interesting. It was kind of like a post-pandemic, post-apocalyptic sort of novel, and I had never read anything like that, and I was interested, and so I went ahead and picked it up and loved it. And so I wanted to read more by her. So when I was in Barnes & Noble recently, I found her book called Sea of Tranquility, which also is a pandemic novel and futuristic, not necessarily post-apocalyptic, but definitely futuristic. And I wanted to read it, but as I was reading reviews, I realized that this book, Sea of Tranquility, has a lot of references to Station 11 and The Glass House. And so I decided to read The Glass House first, even though nothing in this book sounded like anything that I would be interested in, and to tell you the truth, nothing was. It was about Ponzi schemes and elites shopping in Soho and just all kinds of things that are not the kind of stuff I read or even understand or know about, but I flew through it, and it's really just because this is a fantastic writer. She really is a great storyteller and really pulls you in. I enjoyed the story, even though there was nothing about it there that would appeal to me. The only thing I didn't like about it is it's really heavy on profanity. I don't like a lot of profanity, you guys know that, but it has a lot of heavy profanity, so that took it down a star for me. But other than that, it was a good read. So I got that done, and then I read Sea of Tranquility, and I am so glad that I chose to read The Glass House before I read this, and that I had read Station 11, because especially The Glass House, so much of this story is follow-ups to that story. So if you are looking at reading these, I would definitely read The Glass House first, because it will just make things, you will catch so much in this book, Sea of Tranquility, and it will make things make sense. It will just make for a richer reading experience for sure. Like The Glass House, this one also is really heavy on profanity, so that definitely took it down a star for me again. But also like The Glass House, I mean, I finished both of these books in less than 48 hours. For me, that's a big deal because I have a lot going on. And so I just really flew through them very quickly. So they were good reads. So I think she's a great storyteller. I probably will read other things by her, just knowing going in that I'm going to face, stuff I don't like to read about. Okay, then came the weekend, which was the Wasted Weekend. So I had found out about the Wasted Weekend just a couple of days before it started. I was watching my friend Debs on Raina Read Stuff, and she talked about the Wasted Weekend, which is basically the halfway point between Garb August. Garb August 2024 and Garb August 2025. The halfway point was this past weekend. So if you're not familiar with Garb August, it is an event that I'm not sure if it was created by Criminale, but that is who I found out about it from. And it's basically, it's a reading event in August where you just read like trashy stuff. So some people will read really trashy stuff, X-rated explicit things. For me though, I don't like reading stuff like that. I don't read a lot of gory stuff. I don't read a lot of, like I said, things with profanity, things with, sex scenes and stuff. I'm just not interested in reading that. And so I've kind of changed it up for myself. Now, it's not just like explicit. That's not really what it's all about. It's more just about reading that stuff that just kind of is like the throwaway novels, right? Like maybe stuff that you're like, I need to cleanse my head here from this heavy thing I just read. I'm just going to read this, ridiculous fluff, or something that, they sell at the dollar store, or just stuff that's not great literature and it's just kind of becomes ephemera, right? Well, I decided to change it up a little for myself to sort of fit within, what I'm comfortable reading, but also to be just like ridiculous nonsense reading. And so I have been collecting all of the books that I can find that are like the cringiest things that I remember from my grade school and middle school years. So once I got into high school, I was just reading a lot of stuff for school and working, and I didn't read as much in my high school years. But in grade school and middle school, I devoured books. Several a day, I just ate them up. And if you were a kid in the 80s, you remember some of these super cringy, library books and just some of the stuff that is endearing to us, but also like, really, we read that stuff? Okay, so I've been collecting a pile of these books, and so when I found out about Wasted Weekend, I was like, yes, I'm gonna be able to dig into my pile early before Garbagus even hits. And so one of the things I've been collecting is the Sweet Valley High series. I probably have, I don't know, I have many, dozens and dozens of them now. And so I'm trying to get at least like the first maybe 20 or so that I can read those in Garbagus. Those are super cringy. But I didn't want to dig into those yet because I know that I want to read quite a few in order, so I'm going to save them for August. So I got out the other part of my stack, which is just weird, cringy things that I have found. The first one is this one, The Truth About Mary Rose. Now, I had never read this book before, though I'm sure I saw it in my school library. It was kind of before my time. It was more like it was written in the 70s to kids of the 70s. So it was stuff that more like my older aunts would have been reading and things that wasn't before my time. However, this cover, I remember covers like this, right? The Apple paperbacks, the Scholastic Book Club stuff. And so I found this at a thrift shop, picked it up. This book, super weird, just morbid, pointless. This girl, Mary Rose, is obsessed with her dead aunt, who is also named Mary Rose, who the legend says saved an entire apartment building full of people from a fire, but herself died in the fire. She went around ringing the bell and telling everyone to get out, yet she didn't actually survive it herself. And there's an iconic newspaper photo of Mary Rose standing at the window with her arms out, as a savior sort of a thing. So anyway, young Mary Rose, the niece, is obsessed with her. She wants to be a hero like her. She wants to have the great reputation and integrity and all these things. She has built Aunt Mary Rose up into this massive, savior-like figure, bigger than life and all that. The rest of the family doesn't see Mary Rose as that way. The ones who knew her, remembered her, lived with her, don't quite see it the same. And she is so irritating about this character, Mary Rose. The story features a super codependent, whiny grandmother who undermines her daughter's parenting at every point. Mary Rose herself, being the granddaughter, is just manipulative. She thinks of herself as way too highly. She's kind of a little offshoot of her grandmother, really. There's just a lot of really wussy characters, and it all kind of comes together in this big pile of you. I did not enjoy this story, but when I put it up on paperback swap, somebody requested it right away. So somebody out there is looking for this book. I hope they love it. After that one, I read All That Glitters. This is number 3 in the All That Glitters series, called Flashback. And this is the epitome of the kind of stuff that I would just get a whole stack of. I think from the public library, because I don't think that my grade school library would have had this book in it. But this kind of stuff I just thought was just, this couple is supposed to be, I'm sorry that everything is so blurry. I'm having to use my actual camera instead of my phone, and it's not as awesome. But anyway, this couple is supposed to be 16 and 18, and they look more like 28 and 30. But these are the role models that I had as like a 5th grader. The story was published in 1987. It really brought a lot of emotions because it made me think about the level of just sexual harassment that was allowed and expected and poo-pooed off by people, in authority who could have been protecting. If you were a pretty girl in the 80s and 90s, that was a curse in some ways. And I can remember just so many just comments and other weird things that I don't think would fly so much. The public and teachers and, you know, authority figures are much more aware now. They're much more, I think they were aware then, but they are much more willing to do something, to step in, to protect, to say, no, that's not okay. The narrative is changing, and I'm thankful for that. But it just reminded me of so much garbage that us girls went through in the 80s and 90s that we had to put up with, even in school, even from teachers. And when we would say to ourselves, this is not okay. What just happened to me is not okay. What just happened to me is criminal. And you'd go to somebody, and the answers were things like, well, I'm sorry, but he's on the football team, and, you know, if he gets this against him, he's going to get kicked off. It's going to wreck the whole team. Like, you should just stay away from him. Why don't you just stay away from him here? You go sit on the other side of the room, and that way he can't bug you, and, you know, then that way we don't cause a fuss. It was that kind of mentality, right? Oh, well, he's already been in trouble a couple of times, you know. He already has a police record, and if he gets one more, he's going to end up having to go to juvenile detention. And it's just, you know, we really want to make sure that this guy succeeds, so you just stay away from him. And the responsibility was always put on us girls, right? It's our responsibility to make sure we just stay away from them. If you just weren't associating with them, those bad things won't happen, right? It's the same mentality of, well, if you just weren't wearing that short skirt, then that bad thing wouldn't happen. And it just took a lot of responsibility off of, you know, these people who were doing criminal things and saying harassing things. So there was a lot of that in this book. And just a lot that the main character or girl just had to put up with because, you know, she's on this TV show, basically. And she just had to put up with that because, you know, otherwise, well, if you want your job, that just goes along with the job, you know, because you're beautiful, and so therefore you must be harassed. I don't know. It was just one of those weird things where I'm just thankful that things are changing in our society, as well as the kind of stuff that I went through and the kind of garbage that I ended up having to, you know, suffer at the hand of all these nasty boys. Sorry, boys. I actually really like boys. I'm not picking on boys. I have boys. But just, you know, don't be a nasty boy. But the things that, you know, I went through helped me to recognize and be aware and to protect my own daughters. So I guess in that way, it kind of worked out for the good, but would have been nice if none of it happened in the first place, right? Then we get Friendship Blues, all right? I read all of these Saturday morning. I just was like, I'm just going to spend this day reading ridiculous things, get it all out of my system, and then go back to reading stuff that I actually would read, right? So book number 3, this is Friendship Blues by Carol H. Berman. So this is one of the weekly reader. If you guys did weekly reader, does that look familiar? Oh, everything's off. We would like read these and then mark off this little sheet, and then if you read so many in a week, you got some kind of prize or whatever. I never really read much of them. I kind of remember starting to do it, but then I went through like, you know, 35 or something in a week, and the teachers were like, why don't you read something else? Because, you know, I wasn't reading at the average pace for the classroom. So anyway, this book was about this girl who goes to a new school, and she's invited to join the cool kids. The cool kids turn out to be snobs, and she has this other side friend who is a nice person, but she's nerdy. It's like the classic story, right? So then she joins with the snobs for a while, and then the whole time she's hurting the nerdy girl, and then she finally ends up sticking it to the snobs, and the nerdy girl just accepts her back, no problem. The whole problem with it is that the new girl was obviously just as much of a snot as the snobby people she was hanging out with, or she wouldn't have been like that in the first place. So the whole idea of, oh, I'm so glad I don't hang out with the snobs anymore, so I won't be a snob, like, you're responsible for your own actions, right? Why did the weekly reader try to teach us that moral? So not a super great piece of literature, but This one was published in 1985. So I was 6 years old when this one came out. All right, so I read those 3. Then I was like, okay. Like I had gone and got, when I had planned this whole thing out, I went and just grabbed a stack of books, set them on my table, and said I'm going to read them in this order. And so my husband was laughing at me because every time I'd finish one and pick up another, I would just make this face, and he's like, you're doing it to yourself. So I read those 3. Then I got to the cheerleaders. And I started reading, I have book number 9 and book number 14. And I started reading, and I just got a few pages in, and I'm like, nope, no. Because if I thought that soap opera TV show book was heavy on the sexual harassment garbage, this is so packed out, is so gross. I just couldn't, I couldn't do it. The way that these girls had to put up with just this, it's almost like, it's like the authors of these books were just kind of setting a narrative for us, right? Like, this is normal behavior and you just have to accept it. Because the girls in this book would be hit on left and right. And so their answer to that would be to giggle and make some kind of silly response, get out of the situation as fast as possible, and then basically hide. Like, these cheerleader girls wanted to go and practice in the gym, but the basketball guys were making comments in the hallway on their way to practice in the gym. And so the girls knew that that wouldn't be a safe place. And so they giggled, laughed it off with some kind of comment, and then decided, well, we'll just wait for a coach to show up before we practice, because it didn't feel safe going in the gym. And yeah, that behavior, it happened, it was real. But for the authors to play on it and just be like, this is the way it is. This is just how it is, girls. Instead of to give them tools. Like, if girls are reading this series, obviously they look up to these girls, right, that are featured in every one of these books. It's the same set of girls, cheerleader girls. Why didn't we give girls tools in these books? Why didn't a author say, hey girls, this is not okay. Here's how you could deal with that instead. Go get help. Go, stand up to them. Get some help. Ask for different time slots, whatever. There's a lot of ways that the authors of these books could have helped give tools for handling the situation in a way that is right? Instead of just telling us, well, you'll just have to accept that. That's just the way it is. A couple of months ago, I made a video talking about, I think it was Daisy Miller by Henry James. And I was saying how this book, Daisy Miller, really drives home a point that I've been trying to make for a long time. And that is, in the Victorian era and after, when there was all these constraints on women, all these ways they were supposed to act. And more modern generations want to blame that on men and say that men put all these constraints on the women. But when you read a book like Daisy Miller, you see it's the women putting the constraints on the women. It's the women oppressing other women. It's the women not standing up for other women. The guys in Daisy Miller are just like, hey Daisy, how's it going, right? It's the women who look down on her for being so American and open and friendly with everybody, right? And when I'm looking at these books, I mean, we've got Christy Andrews, Carolyn something, Jodie Sorensen, Jennifer Saracen. Like, we have women writing these stories. And so I just have a hard time putting that blame solely on men for supposedly oppressing us and supposedly harassing us and supposedly, causing all of this hurt and oppression in women, when the women are helping to perpetuate that narrative. Why aren't these women, way back in the Daisy Miller story, as well as these stories, why aren't these women standing up for these girls? And why aren't they changing the narrative? I think we kind of got that figured out in this generation, and in my generation and my children's generation. I'm hoping that we're getting it figured out and we're changing that and we're starting to speak up and put our foot down and say, absolutely not. This is not acceptable, right? And there's a lot of men joining in with us too, right? So, like I said, thankful for a changed narrative, but I refused to read these, and I won't. I am getting rid of those as fast as possible. And then by that point, I was just like bummed out. I was just like, these books suck. I don't want to read anything else. I started to read this one called Over the Moon, and it was just depressing, and I was like, no, I gotta be done now. I gotta quit. At that point, I decided to go ahead and pick up another one of my planned reads for this month. This is The Adventures of Conan Doyle. Sorry, The Adventures of Arthur Conan Doyle. This is a biography of the creator of Sherlock Holmes by Russell Miller. This month is Holmes is Where the Heart Is. And so last week I read the first Sherlock Holmes story, A Study in Scarlet. And so this was on my list to read for this week. I haven't gotten very far into it, but it's just one of those books that, you know, it takes time to read. The pages in this are especially thin, I noticed, which is interesting, and the pages are pretty full. So it's a pretty heavy read, and a lot of background information, right? I don't know anything, I mean, that's what a biography is, duh, but I don't know anything about Arthur Conan Doyle really at all. And so everything is new, so I'm taking time to kind of look some stuff up, think through, process. It's not a book that I can really move through very quickly. So I'm about 166 pages in, and I think there's about like 480. So I will probably be reading this all through this coming week. And it might just be my last Holmes read for the month. I have one more fictional book that I was gonna go through, but this may take me a little bit, and you know, I don't want to skip around. The one part I am skipping though is there's a lot of spoilers for the stories, and I've only read 2, and so I don't want to read the spoilers. And so when he starts making comparisons with parts of Doyle's life, you know, and the story he wrote, I've been skipping that. But anyway, so I've been reading that. And then I have a little pile of books that I've been saving for snow days, because Arkansas winter is so weird. We will have a day where we are in like the high 60s, and then a couple days later we have plummeted and we're in the teens. It's so obnoxious. If you're prone to migraines, don't move to Arkansas. It's just bad. The pressure is, it's a mess. But anyway, so I had a little stack of books that I was saving just in case we got another snow day. Well, sure enough, today we have got a ton of snow out there. We're projected to get like 10 to 14 inches by the time that this is all over. It's Tuesday night at 9 right now, and so they are thinking it might be done around midnight, and we might get a little bit more tomorrow, and then it will be out of here. And last I checked, we probably had 5 inches, so I'm not sure if we're going to get a whole ton more snow in the next few hours and then, you know, end up with this crazy amount, or if maybe the projections were a little off. But all that to say, it's beautiful outside. Everything is covered with snow. Everything is shut down. One, because this is the South, but in reality, the roads here are super windy, super curvy, and the edges of the road, you just kind of drop off into ravines, right? So like when we lived in Oregon, we lived in a valley, and if you run off the road, you just kind of run off into, you know, the field, right, or whatever. But here, if you run off the road, you go spiraling, barreling, tumbling down into your doom. So you really want to stay off the roads if you can, because all those curves and turns and drop-offs, you know, is kind of terrifying. But anyway, so we all stayed home, all, you know, work's canceled, whatever. We live on a hill, so it's hard to get off anyway. So we're snowed in. So all that to say, I pulled out The Wood at Midwinter by Susanna Clarke. I bought this a couple of weeks ago. I saw it was Vin at Revenant Reads. He talked about this, I think, in his December wrap-up. And so I had asked him, like, is this a Christmas story? Specifically, should I wait for Christmas? And he's like, not so much. It's a wintry story more than that. But she wrote it as a Christmas story, like for Christmas. That's what she says at the back of it. But It's a winter story. So it was real short. I just read it in a few minutes and I did like it. It's got some really pretty illustrations. And the story's a good story. I think I paid like 20 bucks for this on Amazon. I don't know that it was necessarily worth the $20 for, you know, a 6 or 7 minute read, but it's okay. It's a pretty book and, you know, it's fine. I'll probably read it, you know, each winter just for nostalgia, just for fun. Tells a good story. And I do think that I may want to read more by Susanna Clarke. I've only read Piranesi besides this one. So you guys let me know her other books. Do you like any of her other stories? What have you read? And what should I read? So that's where I'm at right now, guys. It's been, like I said, a really great reading week and just a cozy reading week. So I'm excited to see what comes this week. Hope everybody's having a great day. I will see you soon. Bye-bye.